Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today's an exciting day. It is the launch day for my Miranda button-up top that I am wearing right here. In today's video, I'll tell you a little bit about the mistakes that I made while making my Miranda top, including why I had to frog the whole thing. We'll talk about the construction, the difficulty level, the sizes, the materials you need, and I will show you my tester photos at the end. For my sample, I used Terrapin Fiberworks Harbor Fingering Base in the color Allegory. The Harbor Fingering Base is 70% organic cotton and 30% linen. And I chose this base specifically because I wanted to get the look of like a collared shirt that you would make out of fabric that has that bit of like structural integrity and crispness to it that is kind of hard to achieve with crocheted clothing. If you've never worked with linen before, it does have a little bit more stiffness to it, and that doesn't mean it's uncomfortable. It just means it gives the piece a little more structure, a little more staying power, and you can get more like crisp, clean lines, I find. Now, this base has 437 yards or 400 meters per 100 grams, which is pretty standard for a fingering weight base. When I was communicating with Lila from Terrapin about my color choice and about the different bases, she was a little hesitant to dye the color Allegory on this specific base because it's a light color. This base has a bit of grayness or muddiness to it that can interfere with the lighter colors, but she dyed up a sample and I still really loved it. It's like a subtle minty green gray color and I just love it. I wanted a light color and I wanted the linen, so I really stuck to my guns and I'm happy that I did. If you've never worked with Terrapin Fiberworks before, I definitely recommend her for all of your plant-based fiber needs. She's got all kinds of cottons and bamboos and linens, and her colors are absolutely stunning. I also use Terrapin Fiberworks in a different base. I'll put the other base's information up here because I forget. For my Harlow sweater, and my Harlow sweater is the sweater that I have worn the most in the past year because I only made it about a year and a half ago. I love wearing that sweater, and for some reason it wasn't very popular with my customers, and I try to not take it personally. It's a very basic fingering weight yoke sweater with this beautiful lace down the sleeves, and that like basicness, simplicity mixed with that beautiful cotton yarn and that color, chef's kiss. I love it. It's so soft. Cotton has this like heaviness to it when it's on your body, so it's almost like you're wearing a weighted blanket, and it's just I just love it. Anyways, that is the other thing that I made with Terrapin Fiberworks. Now, also my Miranda button-up. Now, since I used a cotton and linen blend, that does not mean that you have to use a cotton and linen blend. You can use whichever fingering weight yarn you can get gauge with and that you want to feel against your skin. If you want more of my tips on yarn choice, I did a whole YouTube video and a whole blog post all about choosing yarn for crochet garments, and both of those are linked in the description below. I have never really been a person to wear a collared shirt, but I saw a collared sleeveless shirt on one of the fast fashion sites. Yes, I go there for design inspiration, and I was like, I need to make that in crochet because I don't think it really exists in crochet. So I'll throw up one of the inspiration photos here, and you'll see here the inspiration photos. They're kind of longer and flowier, but I wanted to be able to tuck mine in. So mine isn't quite as long and flowy, but I saw the inspiration and I tweaked it a little bit to my own liking. One thing to know about me too is that I am the queen of not wanting to seam anything. So a shirt like this, if you were to sew it, would have a lot of seams, right? You'd be seaming front panel and back panel together at the side and the shoulders. You'd be seaming on the collar, you'd be seaming on the plackets, and I was just like, I'm not about that. Crochet is really wonderful in how easy it is for us to pick up stitches basically anywhere. So this piece is worked without seams, and it's worked in 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. You're only cutting your yarn a few times. I guess it's more than 4 because you're doing the front and back. It's all worked without seams. That's what's most important to know. So it's worked from the top down, and you work the front and back in sections until you reach the underbust, and then you connect the whole body. The body is worked as one all the way down. Then you don't fasten off and you work the plackets, and then you go around the neck and you work the other placket. Then you do end up having to fasten off and reattach for the collar. I couldn't find a good way to make that work where everything stayed even. So you do fasten off and then reattach for the collar, but it is still entirely seamless. You do not need to seam anything. That being said, while you don't have to seam pieces of fabric together in this design, you do obviously still need a needle and spare yarn or thread to attach your buttons. Every time I add things that are not yarn into my designs, like a zipper or buttons, people can panic a little bit. And I don't want you to panic because sewing on buttons is super, super, super easy. And I filmed a brief little tutorial on how to add buttons into your crochet work that I'm going to insert right here. Welcome to a very brief tutorial on how to sew on buttons onto your crochet work. I'm going to show you how to do a 4-hole button, a 2-hole button, and a 1-hole button. Obviously, you'll want to use the same yarn that the body of your piece is made out of, but I'm using a different yarn because it'll be higher contrast so you can see what I'm doing. Let's start with the 1-hole button. Using a length of the yarn and a thin darning needle or a big sewing needle, thread the yarn through your needle. Then you'll want to go on the inside of your work, wherever you want to attach the button to, so opposite to a buttonhole is a common placement. Put the needle up through the work and through the hole in your button. Put your needle back through, making sure you're not going through the exact same spot, but slightly further down or further away from where you came up. The first time I sewed on a button, that was it. I just tied it off, and then I wondered why my button was so darn loose. No matter how tight you tighten that yarn, it's going to stretch and it's not going to be super secure with only one loop through it. So what you're going to do is go back up through around where you put through the first time, exactly where you were, or close to it. It doesn't really matter if you get it exact. And go through the button again. And back down, making sure it's nice and tight each time. And then you're going to do that at least one more time. Back up, through the buttonhole, and then back down. And then you just tie these ends together and weave in those ends. Next, I'm going to show you how to sew on a 2-hole button. It's pretty similar to the 1-hole button, but now you have 2 holes to work through. So you bring your needle from the back to the front and put it through one of the holes of the button. Now, when you are going from the front to the back, you want to make sure that you keep your button in line. You don't want to go in a random spot and have it be on an angle. Whether you want the holes to run vertically or horizontally, depending on your piece, depending on your preference, doesn't really matter. Just whatever angle you attach your first button, you want to probably match it to all the other buttons or it'll look a little bit strange. So I'm going to try and keep my button parallel with the rows of this swatch. So I want to go down through the stitch in the same place that I came up through the stitch. And just like for the 1-hole button, you're going to do that at least 3 times. It gets a little easier after the first one because you can kind of do the from back to front and through the button at the same time without really having to look as much as you do the first time around. Because the holes on this button are fairly large, I could probably even do like 4 or 5 times through it, but I'm just gonna stick with 3. Tie it off, and there you go. You have a 2-hole button attached. And the last one I'm going to show you is a 4-hole button. This one's a little bit trickier, but it's still pretty easy. Just like the others, you bring your yarn from the back to the front with your needle, and you'll put it through the top corner hole of your button. Then, rather than going down or across, you are going to make an X on the front of your button. So you will go through if you came up through the top left, you'll go down through the bottom right. And now you don't want that to be in a straight line. You do want it to be slightly angled down because it's slightly angled down on the front of the button. And pull through. Now you'll want to come up through the bottom left hole. So you'll want to go just slightly to the left on the back and come up through the bottom left hole of the button, and then go down through the top right. Ignore that little thread poking through there. And you'll repeat that whole process at least 2 more times. One thing I have also seen people do with their knit and crochet buttons to make the button pop out a little bit from the fabric is you can put your yarn through the buttonhole, but not through the fabric. Wrap your yarn around the neck there a couple of times, and it just helps the button to pop out a little bit from the fabric, and it helps the button and the fabric that you put over the button through the buttonhole to sit a little bit flatter on your body. I have never noticed a difference in doing this, but if it's something you want to try out, knock yourself out. And then after you've done that, you put it back through, tie it off, and then you have your 4-hole button attached. And there you have it, a 1-hole button, a 2-hole button, and a 4-hole button attached to your crochet work. While we're on the topic of buttons, let's talk about the buttons that I used. So initially, I used the buttons that were the 1-hole buttons in that tutorial I just showed you. They're like this cute little half dome pearl, and I absolutely loved them, but they were too small. I put them on here, and even though in this pattern I only chain 1 and skip 1 stitch for the buttonhole, which is literally the smallest buttonhole that you can make on this piece, the buttons, whenever I would move, would just go pah. And that wasn't the look that I was going for. So I ended up having to go back to the store. They didn't have larger half dome pearl buttons like that, so I got the closest thing to it. They are still a 1-hole button, and they are pearlescent, but they don't have that dome to them. I still love them. I think that they're perfect, and I'm super happy with the final look with the buttons. Again, you don't have to do what I did. You don't have to use a 1-hole button. You can use a 2-hole button or a 4-hole button. It's entirely up to you, just as long as the buttons fit through those buttonholes. So you're aiming for about a 1 centimeter, 1.5 centimeter button, or a 1/2 inch button. Double check it with your buttonholes to make sure, because you don't want to, like I did. And you also don't want to put all the buttons on and then realize that you can't fit them through the buttonholes. Other materials that you will need to make your Miranda button up, obviously yarn. I will put the meterage and yardage here on the screen for you. Now, these meterages and yardages are based on the Craft Yarn Council standard women's sizes, extra small through 5XL. If you're not sure which size you are, I have put the link to the Craft Yarn Council women's sizes in the description below. You are going to choose your size based on your bust measurement. Once you've chosen your size based on your bust measurement, and I cannot stress this enough, out of all of the designs that I've made, this one is probably the most important for you to get accurate gauge. Especially if you got too many stitches in your 4 inches or 10 centimeters, your buttons are going to be like bursting at the seams, right? This only has a little bit of positive ease. If you're taking more of it away by having the incorrect gauge, it's going to make those buttons not look so cute. We want a little bit of ease so that the buttons aren't pulling open on us. When it comes to the difficulty level of the Miranda button up, I would give this like an adventurous beginner level pattern. The stitches are very basic. As with any garment, there is a fair bit of counting and making sure that you're getting the correct gauge, but the most difficult part of this pattern is the parts where you have to work your stitches into the sides of rows. So like the placket is worked up the edge of your stitches, the armhole trim is worked up the edge of your stitches. So those are the most challenging places. If you feel confident working crochet stitches over the ends of rows, you'll be able to handle this pattern. Now let's talk about some of the mistakes I made besides choosing buttons that were too small. When I made mine, my gauge tightened as I went a little bit. I know, I'm the gauge monster and I made a gauge mistake. And I also didn't work enough ease into the piece. I think I only put like a 1/2 inch or 1 inch of ease on top of my bust measurement for my sample, and it ended up being slightly too tight. So here's a picture of my original sample. Because it was too tight, and because I chose buttons that were too small initially, the buttons couldn't even keep it closed. It was just like I would move and it would go pah. So I was like, okay, well, we'll put bigger buttons on it. We put bigger buttons on it, and the buttons were still pulling more than I wanted them to. So I realized I needed a little bit more ease in it. So when I wrote up the pattern, I added a couple extra stitches in the underarm just to give it that like 1/2 inch more than my sample did. On top of that, like I explained in the construction, you work the whole body and then you immediately start working the plackets into the side of the body. And I wasn't super happy with the length of my sample. So I wasn't happy with the length, I wasn't happy with the ease, and when I did my initial progress photos of how to attach when you're working the top portions separately, I forgot to include a picture that had the stitch markers in it because the pattern includes information about using stitch markers. So I knew I at minimum had to remake the top bit with the stitch markers in it. And then I wanted to also add length, so I'd have to take the whole placket off and the whole collar off to add length properly. And I was like, at that point, I might as well just remake the whole piece and make it with that little bit of extra ease that I wanted anyways. So I started with an extra skein that I had and made, I don't know, I got to somewhere around the bust with that skein and then began frogging the original piece to add to this piece. While frogging is obviously not something that I want to do or regularly have to do in designing, it was necessary in this, and it's so much better having this piece fitting the way that I want to, being the length that I want it to be, and I'm very glad that I did it. And because it's a sleeveless top, it works up so fast. I think I did it in like 5 days. Testing for this design was pretty smooth in the grand scheme of testing. I don't think I made any too major mistakes when writing up the pattern. Sometimes I do, but in this one I don't really think I did, or my memory is failing me. Just a couple little minor tweaks here and there were required through the testing process. And I also had such a good, solid group of testers who were asking really great questions throughout the process, and it just made the whole test go so smoothly. So without further ado, here are all of my wonderful tester photos. And that's it. That is the Miranda button-up top. I've been loving the reception that Miranda has been getting so far when I've been showing her off to you all. So thank you so much for the preemptive launch love. And Miranda is now available for purchase on my website and Ravelry. Both of those links are in the description below. If you're not already on my email list, email subscribers get 20% off their first order. So you could potentially get 20% off the Miranda button-up. And you also get my Phoebe crossbody bag pattern for free when you sign up. Email subscribers also get exclusive coupons each time a new design launches. And if that sounds pretty sweet to you, you can sign up via the link in the description below. And that's it. That's the Miranda launch party. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy Miranda. I hope you enjoy crocheting her. And please tag me on Instagram when you make her, or post your project on Ravelry so I can see your beautiful version of Miranda. Happy crocheting and see you again soon. Bye-bye.